Jennifer with Truest TV, and I'm back with another video. And I know they have probably monetized a lot of my videos, but it doesn't matter. It'll see the right people, right? I wanted to go on Instagram and talk about something because the burden of proof rests on the heads of the accusers, right? And this is why it is Black people's duty because it's our duty. We shouldn't have to prove it since they don't have any evidence, but it is our duty to go ahead and do the due diligence of getting out the truth, right? People are mad at us because we now have all the evidence to substantiate our claims, and then they have nothing. But I want to go because I was watching Gaddy, right? And I don't know, it's saved, but it's not popping up. But okay, let's just go to my gallery, my burden of proof, since we want to do stuff like this, because I think that we have to get into a habit of, if you're going to say that we are African, it is time that you prove us being African, right? I want you to show evidence of our African ancestry, right? Other than inference and conjecture, right? So, right, this is a Mayan. This black man is a Mayan. He is a Lankotan Mayan. This was in the early 20th century. This big-nosed, black, dreadlock head man is a Mayan. They have this photo, was taken in the 20th century of a Lankotan Mayan. Now, again, remember how I said the burden of proof or truth rests on the head of the accuser, right? So they think because they sick ICE agents on Black people that is proof of immigrants. No, of us being immigrants. No, it's not. It's just proof. Why do you think you're not doing due process? You're not doing due process because you have no evidence to prove that we're African. You are missing primary sources, right? You are missing embarkation from Africa, disembarkation records to America, manifests. That would be a primary source of us being African. You're missing records. You're missing the embarkation, disembarkation of the White Lion, right? That was supposed to be in Virginia, the Treasurer, the Sowan Bautista, Amistad, Catilda, right? That's just to name a few. The Dutch man of war is also missing embarkation, disembarkation records from Africa to the Americas. Why do we not have primary sources? But here we have actual photos of a Lankotan Mayan in the 20th century of a black man, big-nosed, lock-haired man, being a Mayan. We have American Indian chiefs. Come on. The burden of truth it rests on the shoulders of the accuser. But let the accused go ahead and prove their point. Because if you have no evidence, why should I prove that I'm an American if you have no evidence to prove that I am an African? That is why they're not doing due process. See, they practice it out with the Mexicans and the immigrants first to see if anybody would object. And people did and say, no, you should do due process because you don't know how long a person's been somewhere, blah, 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 blah. They don't want to do due process because they want to take the land from the Aboriginals, which is the Black people in America. Due process, they don't want to do it because they can't. If they had to do due process, they cannot factually, with document proof that we come from Africa. They do not have embarkation from Africa and disembarkation manifests to show them bringing us from Africa into the Americas. There aren't any. Why do you think we haven't been deported? Because they can't even prove that they got us as imports. 1924 Racial Integrity Act clearly stipulates we will no longer call you dark-skinned people Indian, but Negro, colored, and black. Freedmen. Let's go about the freedmen. There are no freedmen records that have us classified as African. Let's say that again. There are no freedmen documents that classify us as African. Freedmen records only say that we were Negro, colored, and black. Well, according to the 1924 Racial Integrity Act, what were they called before they were called Negro, colored, and black? Well, according to the words verbatim, it says we will no longer cast these Negroes. What does Negro mean? It's a Latin word for black. These dark-skinned people as Indian, but Negro, colored, and black. I digress. Where's your evidence to prove that we are African? Our birth certificates don't say we're African. As a matter of fact, my mother was born in 1949. Her birth certificate says she's colored. My grandma was born in 1920. 1928, I think, to be precise. Something like that. 1920 she was born. Of December 25th. And she also, on her birth certificate, which we have, her death certificate, which also has her birth on it, right? She's classified as Negro and colored. None of it at all. And before you say, well, that's synonymous to African, not according to any encyclopedias or any dictionary or any research. According to, from the 15, 14, 16, 17, 1800s, there are no encyclopedias, dictionaries that states that Negro, black, or colored was synonymous to have African descent. It's not documented anywhere. So, not African, Negro, colored, and black. Well, first of all, these are legal terms. Reclassification to remove someone from land. That's it. That's their descriptor words and legal terms that will disqualify one from land. Number one, the word black didn't even have a connotation of nationality or race in the 14, 15, 16, 17, and 1800s. It just meant one born into servitude. And then white also meant that one was not born into servitude. It had no connotation of race or ethnicity when these terms were created. You can look in the black code, the black laws. These words were never synonymous for African descent. There's no encyclopedia or congressional dictionaries that show evidence of black, Negro, or colored meaning or being synonymous for African descent. Freedmen, again, if you look on freedmen documentation, none of it says descendants of African. They have them as colored, Negro, and black. So again, the burden of proof should rest on the shoulders of the accusers, right? Because you can't say I'm guilty if you have no evidence. And I shouldn't have to prove that I'm innocent when you have no proof that I'm guilty. So you have no evidence to prove I'm African. Why am I proving that I am American? You have nothing to say that I'm not. Right? So I want to know the basis of America and ICE. What are you using? Oh, you're using the 1924, you're using the 1988 reclassification given by Jesse Jackson, because all I have to do, because that term was created, I gotta really dye these eyebrows, sorry. All I have to do is show my mother's birth certificate, right? And my father's birth certificate, because the term African American wasn't coined until 1988, which means my sister that was born in 1987 wasn't African American. And anybody who is descendants to anybody prior to 1988 would not legally be able to be classified as African American, as that term was not coined until 1988. So if you try to use that, you would be illegally deporting people, because their family's bloodline has never been called African American until 1988. My mother was called colored. It was never synonymous to being African American. So if you're using African American as a way to try to deport black people, well, we have parents who couldn't be deported. Because my mother was born in 1949. And my grandmother and great-great-grandmother and great-great-great-great-grandmother that I traced all the way back to 1620, owning on land patents, owning 600 acres of land, right, were never called African American. So if you're saying, oh, this proves that African American and FBA are immigrant terms cast on American indigenous to reclassify them and steal their land, you have no evidence to prove that we are African. Hello, somebody. Need I keep going? Do we want to keep going down this rabbit hole of the burden of proof being America's and they can never prove that we have African ancestry? Again, you're missing primary sources. Embarkation, disembarkation, Sub-Saharan to America records, manifest, ledgers. Where is it? You're talking about telling a people to get off land. You don't have evidence that they don't belong to the damn land. And as a matter of fact, the freedmen records that connect to the old settler treaties prove that we are in fact American Indian. Given the fact that there are no freedmen records that shows the term African or African American being the origins of any freedmen. Come on, show us your proof before I chew you up with mine. Come on, we can even go DNA. Let's go with the DNA, boo. Let's go with the haplogroup E1B1A. I love when people do that. I love when they start talking genetic science. Ooh, because that's the one that's even better. E1B1A haplogroup. It shows this genetic pattern, right? Right? This genetic pattern that belongs to the people of similar backgrounds, right? Right? They all belong to this tribe. Right. Now, when you have a haplogroup, E1B1A, and the single nucleotide polymorphism that is being extracted from the DNA, right, on these Ancestry.coms or any genetic testing, right, any genetic testing, right, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, Blood Quantum, right, the One Drop Rule, Dawes-Rhodes Act, Blood Quantum, right, when you have haplogroups such as E1B1A and its single nucleotide polymorphism, and you go into and you start going through the maternal and the paternal bloodline, the only thing that this haplogroup and this single nucleotide polymorphism can tell you is that you belong to your grandparents, your mother, your father, your sister, your brothers. That is what these haplogroups and single nucleotide polymorphisms do. But what they don't do is give geographical location of origin, because DNA can only tell you, it's vague. It can only tell you who you are related to. It will never give you a geographical location. There is no geographic single nucleotide polymorphism that can be extracted from your DNA that can give you a landmass. But what can happen? So for instance, if you find the haplogroup E1B1A in Africa, right? You take my DNA, for instance. I'm an American brown-skinned person. If you took my DNA and an E1B1A haplogroup that I belong to, and you find that DNA in Africa, does that mean that I'm African? Well, no, because I'm in America and that African is in Africa, which means that that African has American roots. So if you're saying what comes first, the egg or the chicken? Well, the burden of proof rests on the head of the accuser. You have to have records to prove birth certificates, death certificates, land patents, effigies, busts, family crest, right? Coats of arms. You would have to have evidence to prove, right, that African isn't an American. right? So again, you would need some record, even knowing their haplogroup, my haplogroup being E1B1A, right? When you take that single nucleotide polymorphism and you study it and say, hey, people in Africa got DNA matched with people found in America, and then 10%, Nigerian, 20% Southeast Asian, 10% Portuguese or Spanish. You know how they give you on the Ancestry.com. That is not origin, that is migration. So your single nucleotide polymorphism, that haplogroup that is being found in all these different regions, is proof of migration, not origin, because it doesn't give a timeline of when that haplogroup or that single nucleotide polymorphism from that haplogroup got planted in Africa, America, Asia, or Europe, Oceania, or anywhere else on the globe. End of discussion. Unless you have birth certificates, or unless white America has embarkation, disembarkation, manifest from Africa to the Americas with a list of our surnames on it. And why do I say surnames? Well, there's no historical records that we got our surnames from alleged slave masters. There's no congressional records to prove that. The same way there's no congressional records to prove that you're Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian, or Irish. None. See, in order for you to have enslaved me, Ellis Island records wouldn't stipulate that you didn't get here until 1840. And then the majority in 1892 of so-called white folk. Did you forget your own Ellis Island records that actually the burden of proof, because I'm accusing you of lying about your own origins, rest on my head to prove? All Ellis Island records prove that so-called white Americans, including your Native American counterparts who came from Southeast Asia and Siberia, right? Your Ellis Island records and manifests prove when you got to America. So I debunked your African transatlantic slave trade based on your own records of coming into America. End of discussion. Now, I want America, because I know what you're trying to do with ICE. That's why you won't. It doesn't prove we're immigrants because you use ICE against us. It just proves that you're willing to do whatever it takes to not show the burden of proof that we are in fact American Indian. See, because that's the reason why you are not trying to, what is the word I'm looking for? That is the reason why you're not doing due process. You think that we're silly? We knew when you first didn't do due process why you weren't. All black people say, we all kind of rolled our eyes and kind of went like, they're not doing due process because they want to try to deport black people and call them African immigrants. We already knew that it was about us. Everything is about us because we're amazing. I get it. Our history is so extensive, everybody wants a piece of it. I know. We know. I'm sitting here looking in the early 20th century of an actual photo of a Lankotan Mayan. And this is a legitimate photo, and he is a black man with locks, which would make sense now when we go to Bonampak and to Texla, if I'm saying it wrong, sorry, Mexico, where the Mayans are clearly depicted as Negro, kinky hair, lock-drawn, gold teeth wearing, long chain, loincloth, head wrap wearing Negroes. Do I need to keep going? Or did I make my point? This is Kendra with Trust TV. Like, share, and subscribe. I love God. I love the Lord. Why do I love God so much? Because he said if he be truth, right? He's truth. And the devil be a liar. The lie will not stand. You understand me? So we are looking at a people whom had to be reclassified and is still being reclassified. Now the new reclassification is FBA. Why aren't Europeans being reclassified? I mean, like, you got people from Czech Republic, you got people from Ukraine, Russia, Armenian people, we know they reclassified themselves to Scottish and Irish. I don't want to get into that, but you Slavics, Armenians, right? I don't listen, because then but anyway, I go into a rabbit hole if I start going all the way over there. Why are any of these people being, like Kim Kardashian, for instance? She's Armenian. Why is she not reclassified? Southeast Asians came into America, Southeast Asians, and then they came out in 1924 as Native Americans. They were also, but the ones who decided not to be kept their Southeast Asian, whether they came from the Philippines, China, Vietnam, right? They're still themselves. Europeans are still Europeans. Why is it that it took America 369 years to call so-called black people African? And it wasn't even coined by white America. It was coined by a man who said that he himself is a American Indian. And he said, and it was coined in 1988 by an American Indian man who just so happened to look like the people he's reclassifying to African American. Now they're trying to make us call ourselves FBAs by using immigrant groups. All skin folk and kinfolk. Why are we the only people reclassified? We were reclassified according to the 1924 Racial Integrity Act. We will no longer cast these Negroes, brown-skinned people, right? Latin word for black-skinned people, right? We will no longer call, right? We will no longer call these people, what people? These Negroes, dark-skinned people, Indian, but Negro color in black. He didn't reclassify us from African. He didn't reclassify us to African. He said we will no longer call them Indian, but Negro colored in black. Old Freedmen records don't have us classified as African. The terminology wasn't even in use to even synonymously mean that we had African origin. So where are you pulling this African origin from? You can't even do it genetically. This is Kendra with Trust TV. Like, share, and subscribe. Stay up, stay blessed. Put God first above all else. Peace out. Bye for now.